A comet is on a crash course with Earth. Can a team of astronauts save humanity before it's too late? Today I'll recap a 1998 sci-fi action film, Deep Impact. So keep your eyes wide open and stay safe. The movie starts with two students at the astronomy club, Leo and his girlfriend, Sarah. Leo spots an unknown object in the sky, and they tell their teacher, Mr. Perry. He thinks it might be a satellite, so he suggests they take a photo and send it to Dr. Wolf, a professional astronomer. Dr. Wolf discovers the object and realizes it's on a crash course with Earth. He tries to email his findings, but the server is down. In a hurry, he copies the data onto a floppy disk and names the comet Wolf Biedermann. He races down the mountain to reach his headquarters, but disaster strikes. On the way, he crashes in a fiery wreck, and sadly, he doesn't survive. Jenny Lerner is a news researcher working for her boss, Beth Stanley, who is the White House correspondent. Jenny wants to become a journalist or an anchor, but Beth keeps denying her the chance. Instead, Beth asks Jenny to research the recent resignation of the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Alan Rittenhouse. Later, Jenny meets her mother, Robin, for drinks and lunch. Robin seems distracted by the fact that her ex-husband Jason is now dating a younger woman named Chloe. Jason and Chloe recently got married and have very young twin children. Jenny meets Patricia Ruiz, Alan's secretary, and learns that Alan spoke directly to the president about Ellie, a woman who might be his mistress. Jenny tracks down Alan, who is leaving with his family on a boat, carrying a lot of supplies. Then the Secret Service takes Jenny to meet the president. The president tells Jenny to keep the ELE, extinction level event, a secret for 2 days. After that, he will hold a press conference and give Jenny the first question, knowing how much it could help her career. Jenny does some research and discovers that ELE stands for extinction level event, which means an asteroid is going to hit Earth. She keeps this information hidden from Beth. At the press conference, Beth sits in the last row, while Jenny sits in the second row and gets the first question. The president explains that Comet Wolf Biedermann is heading straight for Earth and will strike in 1 year. He also reveals that a US-Russia joint mission is being launched to intercept the comet and blow it up before it reaches Earth. The name of the ship they will use is Messiah. President Beck sets up a video conference to introduce the crew of the Messiah. The team includes Mission Commander Oren Monash, pilot Andrea Baker, Medical Officer Gus Partenza, Navigator Mark Simon, Russian nuclear physicist Colonel Mikhail Tolchinsky, and NASA veteran Captain Spurgeon Tanner. Colonel Tolchinsky is the spacecraft's engineer, while Captain Tanner will land the ship on the comet's surface to plant the warheads. This team has a huge job ahead of them to save Earth. Jenny's MSNBC crew is in a panic, preparing for the big press conference, and they are shocked to see her sitting right there. Jenny takes full advantage of her chance and asks 3 questions before finally sitting down. President Beck acknowledges that the survival of all humanity is at risk, but he insists that life will go on, and he is determined to make sure humanity survives this disaster. He hints that Biedermann, the astronomer, is dead, but Leo Biedermann is alive and now famous. Then, Partenza, a crew member, explains the dangers of the mission. The Messiah crew has only 7 hours to work before the sun will rise on the section of the comet they need to land on. If they don't finish in time, the sun's heat will cause dangerous gas eruptions from the comet's surface. The crew must work fast to avoid these deadly hazards. 2 months later, the Messiah crew is taken to the station by the Space Shuttle Atlantis to dock with the orbital station where the Messiah was built. A news crew explains how the ship was put together and reveals that it's powered by a new nuclear propulsion system called Orion. This system was first developed by Russian engineers for nuclear warfare, but now it will help the crew reach the comet before it gets too close to Earth. 5 months after the Messiah leaves, Stuart Cayley's MSNBC news crew gathers for another conference to talk about their coverage of the mission. Everyone is asked to share what they've been working on. Cayley announces, to Beth's surprise, that Jenny has been given a news anchor job for the coverage program. Since Jenny was the one who broke the story about the comet, she has gained a lot of national fame. Baker and Tanner carefully guide the Messiah down to the comet's surface, but they must fly through a dangerous field of rocks caught in the comet's tail. Some rocks hit the ship, causing a little damage, but they still manage to land the ship safely. They have just under 6.5 hours before the sun will rise on their section of the comet. Right away, things start to go wrong. The drilling machines, called moles, can't dig deep enough into the comet's surface as quickly as they need to. With only about an hour and a half before sunrise, Baker and Tanner, waiting nervously in the spacecraft, know they're running out of time. Once the sun rises on their part of the comet, the surface temperature will skyrocket by 350 degrees in just a few minutes. This will cause dangerous superheated gas to shoot up through the surface. It's like trying to work in a minefield. On the surface of the comet, one of the moles gets stuck at 75 meters deep. The crew knows this isn't deep enough to place the warhead, and it would just break off pieces of the comet's surface. Commander Monash decides to climb down into the shaft made by the stuck mole to try and free it, even though the other crew members warn him about the time running out. Finally, the stuck mole starts drilling again, and Commander Monash quickly climbs back up the tether to get back to the ship. As he's climbing, the horizon begins to change. Tulchinski urgently tells the crew to lower their solar shields on their visors. Just as Monash reaches the surface, a gas jet shoots him up before he can lower his visor's shield. The sun's full light shines through his visor and hits his unprotected eyes. The crew pulls him back in using the tether cable and rushes toward the Messiah landing module. Sadly, Partenza is blown into open space and lost. The rest of the crew barely makes it to the module in time. Colm Tulchinski oversees the preparation of the nuclear warheads. Meanwhile, President Beck is in a White House office with Morton Entrekin, his chief advisor, along with the cabinet and several top military leaders. The phone rings, and the person who answers looks at President Beck with a serious expression. President Beck goes on live TV to share the bad news. The warhead didn't destroy the comet. Instead, it just broke off a huge chunk of it, about 1.5 miles wide. This chunk is now big enough to cause massive damage on Earth. Both this piece and the main, 6-mile-wide part of the comet are still heading straight for Earth. Houston Mission Control can no longer communicate with the Messiah, so they don't know the condition of the crew or the spacecraft. Beck then shares that the U.S. has been digging shelter caverns in the limestone cliffs of Missouri, which will serve as a sort of Noah's Ark. These shelters will hold 1 million people and enough plants and animals to help repopulate the Earth once the disaster passes. 200,000 people have already been selected, including leaders, doctors, scientists, engineers, teachers, soldiers, and artists. In 1 month, a national lottery will choose 800,000 more people to join them in the Ark. Jenny's MSNBC News program explains how the lottery will work. The lottery drawing will happen on August 10th and will select 800,000 people based on their social security numbers. People over the age of 50 are excluded from the general lottery. However, the 200,000 pre-selected individuals, who include experts needed for rebuilding society, may have people over 50 years old. As Jenny continues her report, the Biederman and Hotchner families are watching together at the Biederman home in Richmond. Their phone rings, and Ellen Biederman, Leo's mother, answers the call. The Biederman family is told they've been pre-selected. It's clear that a rift is growing between the Hotchner family, especially Sarah, and the Biederman family. On board the Messiah, Tanner tries to understand what the crew wants to do. Commander Monash says he wants to go home, and the rest of the crew agrees with him. Meanwhile, Leo tries to use his new status to get Sarah's family added to the lottery list. He even marries Sarah to increase his chances. However, when the National Guard arrives, Sarah's family is not on the list. Sarah refuses to leave, and Leo decides to go with his parents to the Lime Mountains. Back at home, Jenny's mother, Robin, takes her own life. Jenny is filled with anger and frustration, and she lets it all out on her father, blaming him for leaving her mother in the first place. She feels a twisted sense of satisfaction when Jason mentions that Chloe, scared for her life, has run to her mother. Jenny cruelly tells her father that she feels like an orphan. Jason later comes to Jenny's office, telling her she's not an orphan and showing her old pictures of them together. Jenny, still upset, walks away. As the Biederman family reaches the caves, Leo finally finds the courage to go back for Sarah. His dad wishes him good luck as he leaves. At the same time, the Titan missile strike has been launched at the two comets, which are only 14 hours away from hitting Earth. Jenny goes live on air to report about the missile strike, explaining everything to the public. Meanwhile, in the Oval Office, President Beck prepares to deliver the bad news. The missiles failed to push the comets off course. With no more options left, it's clear that the comets are going to hit Earth, and the planet faces massive destruction and loss of life. The smaller piece of the comet, named Biederman, is set to hit Earth at 4:37 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It will crash into the Atlantic Ocean, just off the coast of Cape Hatteras. This will cause a huge tsunami that will move toward the East Coast faster than the speed of sound. The tsunami will destroy everything in its path, including major cities like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, Atlanta, and Miami. All these places will be completely wiped out. The bigger piece of the comet, called Wolf, will crash into Western Canada a few hours after the smaller one. This will cause an extinction-level event. Within 2 days of the crash, the sky will be filled with dust and debris, making it dark for the next 2 years, like a nuclear winter. With no sunlight, plants will die, and soon after, all animals will die too. However, Captain Tanner on the Messiah has thought of one last plan. He calls the crew together to explain. They can't do anything about the Biederman fragment, but Tanner believes they can still stop the huge Wolf comet. A giant crack in the comet has formed due to gas eruptions, leading deep inside. The Messiah still has 4 nuclear warheads. If they can send these warheads into the crack, they might break the comet into small enough pieces to stop it. Tulchinski and Simon realize that the Messiah is running out of life support and fuel. They know it's almost impossible to land again on the comet's surface, much less get back off after planting the warheads. The mission seems impossible. and they all know it's a suicide mission. The Messiah will have to crash into the comet's interior and detonate the warheads. The crew feels grim but accepts their fate. Meanwhile, as the last evacuations happen, Jenny gives up her seat to Beth and heads to meet Jason at their beach house. Leo grabs Mr. Hotchner's bike and heads out to find Sarah in a busy traffic jam. He finally finds her, but her parents force her to leave and head for the mountains with her little brother. Time is up. The Biedermann comet fragment crashes through Earth's atmosphere and races toward impact. People far and wide watch as it speeds past the coastline before slamming deep into the Atlantic Ocean. A huge mushroom cloud erupts, sending shockwaves into the air. The sky turns dark, and birds are thrown around helplessly. A tsunami races toward the eastern coast, unstoppable. At the Lerner beach house, Jenny sobs in fear, but Jason pulls her close and holds her tight, closing his eyes. The tsunami hits, starting its path of destruction. We see New York City getting wiped out, with the final shot showing the city almost completely underwater. The tops of the World Trade Center stick out, and the broken head of the Statue of Liberty bounces down Wall Street like a basketball. On the Virginia coast, people have abandoned their cars and are running everywhere, shouting and panicking as they race to find higher ground. Some people just stand by their cars, waiting for the inevitable. Among them are Chuck and Vicky Hotchner, holding each other tightly and finding comfort in their last moments. Leo and Sarah are in a small group of people who manage to get off the road. They hurry toward the hills, hoping to reach higher ground before it's too late. The crew of the Messiah has made their final preparations to intercept the Wolf Comet. They've asked for their families to be brought to the Mission Control Center in Houston so they can say their final goodbyes. Baker's husband and daughter, along with Simon's fiancée, are waiting there. But Commander Monash's wife is still on her way and hasn't arrived yet, and Tanner's two sons are on active naval duty and can't be reached. Realizing this, Tanner says a quiet prayer to his late wife, telling her he's finally coming home to her. Baker and Simon say their tearful goodbyes. Just as the transmission is about to end, officers rush into the control room with Mariette Monash right behind them. She arrives just in time, holding her baby son, whom she named Oren after her husband. Although Commander Monash is still blind, he can hear Mariette and little Oren Jr. He gives them a heartfelt farewell as Colonel. Tulchinsky sets the warhead timers, and Baker and Tanner calculate the final trajectory for the mission. They say their goodbyes to each other, and both Baker and Simon close their eyes. Captain Tanner flies the Messiah into the comet's interior, and the warheads explode, shattering the Wolf Comet into millions of tiny pieces. Meanwhile, Leo, Sarah, and Sarah's baby sister managed to climb to the top of the highest hill they could find, narrowly escaping the massive tsunami. They watch as the comet's fragments light up the sky in a fiery display. Deep Impact ends with President Beck giving a powerful speech to a large crowd in Washington, D.C. The waters of the Atlantic Ocean have finally receded and settled back into the ocean basin. With great emotion, President Beck acknowledges the huge loss of life across America, South America, Europe, and Africa. He tells the people that they must honor those who lost their lives and keep moving forward to rebuild their world. As the camera zooms out, the final shot shows the U.S. Capitol building being rebuilt, with the crowd cheering in hope for a new beginning. So, which awesome movies should we recap next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below and let's make it happen. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you never miss out on our movie recaps. We've got plenty more coming your way. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Produced by Warner Movie Recaps 2.